as you move from west to east. And so, you know, we just move whatever 5-10 kilometers to the east from where we were yesterday, and we're facing similar complexity.
Yep.
Beauty of geology. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Hola.
Chance. Back in action.
Indeed.
Hola. Buen dia.
2023.
See,
Back in the Andes.
undisclosed location.
Undisclosed. Hint, it is Creek.
Oh! Undisclosed location. If you're a real geologist, you'll be able to tell where we are by the geology. We're gonna see some sick geology today. We're just packing up our camp. Just had some granola and some weak coffee. Indeed. We're getting our various tools together. We are on a little backpacking trip. Got the new Black Diamond Eldorado out here. Fire, tent. Little pirka, super calm night. We're gonna go on a little romp today. Yeah, we'll give you a big old introduction to the region. If you have viewed the YouTube before, you know that an absolutely crucial part of a day in the field is the warm-up. This man's flexible as fuck. That's first stretch of the day. Palms to the ground. Oh! I'm currently pampering myself. Self-care really is a fresh pair of socks. Not too frequent of an occurrence. Filling in some early morning field notes here. Some things from yesterday, some objectives for today as we head west. That peak is the border with Chile, right behind Chance's head there. So we're tucked way up here in the hinterland of the Andes, doing some geologic mapping various structures that are new to us, and you'll be along with us as we explore them. Probably only about a kilometer west of our camp right now. Chance is right over there. We're going to provide some more context about what it is exactly we're doing, what geologic mapping is, and the kinds of questions that we address using these different field methods. But I just wanted to share this landscape with you. This is one of those rock types where Chance and I try not to let repetition breed indifference, as they say, in that it's wild stuff. You might have a guess of what it is. If not, I'll just tell you. These are evaporite deposits. These are all gypsum. And this formation, which we will probably talk about ad nauseum today, is called the Aquilco formation. And it's mid to late Jurassic in age, somewhere, let's say, estimate around 165 million years old. And the thing about this Aquilco formation is that it is very, very weak, and as a result, it creates a lot of issues when trying to interpret the thrust belt, as we call it, the fold and thrust belt of the Andes. And the reason that is it causes a lot of really wacky folding. For any undergrads, you know, people who are learning what strike and dip are, you basically can't get strike and dips on these rocks because they behave ductily. they flow within the thrust belt. And we'll show you examples of this stuff being repeated and being a lot thicker than it should be. Perhaps we'll find some examples of how highly deformed it is as we go throughout the day. But we're just working our way up the creek. I'm in the Aquilco now. There's Chance. This is called the Rio Damas formation back there. And this is a very complicated face of structures, thrust faults, that we'll tell you more about. Hola, caballos.
Indeed.
What do you got there?
Got a camera.
This Chance listens to camera podcasts now. Audio's okay, probably. So, very broad overview. If you're a geologist, you know these things. We have the principle of superposition. We have the principle of original horizontality. Generally speaking, this states that younger rocks are deposited on older rocks, and that those rocks are deposited horizontally, respectively. And so what we do when we come out here into the Andes is we look for exceptions to those rules, I guess you could say. And what I mean by that is that when you have compressive stresses generated, that manifests as contractional deformation. And at its most basic level, rocks stack on top of themselves. So what this is an example of behind us is an older rock. This would be lower Jurassic rock, known as the Puesto Araya. You may be able to see a stream up there, kind of in that saddle. And what we think this structure is a older rock, or a structure placing older rock on younger rock. We're not entirely sure what the age of that younger rock is yet, but these are the kind of structures that we look for and that we map and sample eventually. It's definitely not always as simple as this. You can have things that are overturned. One thing, I'll move the camera really quick, that Chance and I have been dealing with a lot. We haven't been up this ridge yet, but our eyes are starting to get adjusted to these different kinds of rocks, particularly these white beds known as the Aquilco formation, potentially up there. One thing that is very clear in this map area that we're dealing with is there's a ton of this Aquilco, and what you can basically interpret that as a potential explanation is that these rocks have been either folded, definitely folded intensely, but also potentially duplicated multiple times by multiple thrust faults. And so that's kind of what we're dealing with. We're going to get way up in the guts here, but this was just a good view. All right, so it's all good and well to identify potential big structures like we did across the creek in that previous video. When you get up closer, you can obviously look for additional evidence of faulting. Isn't that right, Chance?
Yes, and here we have a prime candidate.
See, so I'll come down to you in a sec, Chance. What we're looking at here is a ton of calcite. Also, we're surrounded by breccia, which is a pretty good giveaway for a fault zone where you have extremely angular clasts of, we don't know exactly what yet, but we have some ideas. And then those clasts are surrounded by this really intricate and disorganized web of calcite. And down by Chance, what do we got?
We have this fat layer of calcite, and you can kind of see these like bands, which suggest it was like concentrically grown. Probably this band closest to the breccia grew first, and then they get increasingly young towards the top. Caden mentioned the clasts in the breccia, which look a lot like a sandstone called the Puesto Araya, which occurs low in the section that we've seen before. And yesterday, just over there, I saw a similar breccia with class of Tordillo, which is a redder sandstone and siltstone that occurs higher in the section. So maybe from this outcrop and that one over there, we could suggest that there's a big fault that puts Puesto Araya on Tordillo, And then there was later heavy-duty fluid flow that precipitated this calcite in the breccia zone, the damage zone.
Making our way up to this potential hanging wall. It's just a beautiful day to be in the field. Feeling very grateful. We're fairly convinced we are in the lower Jurassic Puesto Araya formation. There's a lot of kind of pendants or lenses of gypsum, which can be confusing. There's chance, but we're exploring some cool terrain. Probably gonna get around this snowfield up there. Here we are out here. What do you got there?
Man, what is this bread called?
It's like ras barrel.
We have some like Argentine flatbread stuff with salami and cheese. It's good.
We've got the breads, the cheese, a little lump of cheese, and I am actively cleaving off some salam. Finished product. A lot better than some of the other meals we've had out here. You can see a little bit of Aquilco, gypsum up there on the ridge. Chance and I are back on the trail. We're at about 10,000 feet, and we both just hammered that salami.
Feeling sluggish.
Feeling sluggish, dude. Yeah, we hit some of those fucking salami and cheese hitters, and then put in some Zin, and my heart rate is skyrocketing. We were laughing about, we were telling you the fundamental truths of geology, one of them being original horizontality, and then we were pretty convinced that we came across some really young like pyroclastic flow or reworked volcanic deposits, and they actually don't follow the law of original horizontality. They'll fill topography. So that's like an example of, we don't know for sure, but it's possible that these are deposits, volcanic deposits, that fill in pre-existing topography.
Maybe you can sketch it on the screen, but this, I think you can clearly see here how it's discordant with the beds underneath.
Yeah, right.
So like the beds underneath are dipping kind of to our right and into the hill, and the light colored volcanic stuff is dipping to the left and out of the hill.
Yeah. All right. We've gained another 100 meters or so. Amazing views opening up of Cerro Sosneado. We've been working a lot in this country and here and to our north. South is that way. Chances down here, we're looking at this limestone interbedded with siltstone, calcareous siltstones. Something we haven't said is that these lower Jurassic rocks in the thrust belt here are shallow marine rocks, kind of transitioning into deeper marine depending on where you are in an east-south, an east-west location. These rocks up here are about 150 million year old volcaniclastic rocks. I think I mentioned them earlier. They're called the Rio de Mas Formation. Something that is super interesting to us is if we do have a big fault right here, as it seems we do with late Jurassic Aquilco, and then to our west we have this hanging wall of Puesto Araya. Where does this fault go? You know, if we're looking due south, the strike of the Andes, the orientation of the Andes is north-south. You either need to put some sort of structure in here to explain the absence of this fault as you move to the south. So these are the kinds of relationships we think about out here. We first and foremost need to identify the rock, which we're doing as best we can, and then we create hypotheses, different structures that can explain the spatial relationships of rocks in the field. And I mean, man, it's hard to focus on the geology when you're in a place that looks like this. It's just incredibly beautiful. One thing that's kind of interesting is that Cerro Sosneado, a lot of these volcanic rocks are Pleistocene in age. So they're extremely young. Chance and I have been, we recently realized that we have been sleeping at the base of quaternary volcanoes, which means that potentially they could pop their top at any time and evaporate us in a pyroclastic flow, which wouldn't be the worst way to go.
Was that on camera? I
might have caught the end of it. Chance and I have the early afternoon mental fog / anger.
We hiked a long ways up the drainage and didn't really find anything too revealing. It's a lot of volcanic crap, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. We've been out for 5.5 hours. We'll almost certainly be out for 5.5 more.
That's not volcanic shit. It's like limestone.
All right, gotta go. New outcrop, new issues. Oh yeah, look at that bedding. Chance, do you have any advice for aspiring field geologists?
I would say double check your growth structures, kids.
This is a bed, so in general we're in interbedded sandstones. You can see these green finer grained rocks to our west here, and there are interbeds of this coarser material, medium to coarse grained sandstones. In other videos, in our other day in the life, Chance provides a description of why, or the techniques that we use, specifically low temperature thermochronology. So the idea here is that we are going to separate out accessory minerals, primarily the minerals apatite and zircon, and then we have a variety of techniques that utilize radioactive decay and the accumulation of daughter products in those accessory minerals. And hopefully we'll be able to constrain the timing at which these rocks were exhumed through a certain depth in the crust.
Cuyo group, Puesta Araya, the kind of brown stuff, it looks like it's dipping to the east, and then it's overlain by that Aquilco gypsum we talked about earlier, which also looks like it's dipping to the east. Now, if this was a thrust relationship, you'd expect the older Puesta Araya to be on top of the Aquilco, but it looks like it's the other way around. But we just walked through a sequence of steepening dips, so we think that maybe these apparently east dipping Puesta Araya rocks are actually overturned. So basically their west dip got so steep it flipped, and now it's an east dip. And maybe the contact between those two units is a thrust fault, but the thrust itself has actually also been overturned.
We're probably in the proximal footwall of this big thrust fault in the Aquilco. Wanted to show some of this crazy internal deformation that's hidden and perhaps beside the point, but usually not accounted for in estimates of shortening in the Andes. This stuff absorbs a ton of it's extremely weak. It behaves ductily, and you can see this remarkable disharmonic folding. There's more beautiful examples of it as we come around, perhaps a little bit clearer. There's actually an unusually nice bedding in this stuff. Usually it's completely blasted, but you can see Chance here. And what we're trying to piece together today is that it looks, obviously, once your eye is tuned to it, that this Aquilco in the footwall here, this gypsum, continues up to this ridge behind Chance. One thing that your eye also gets used to are all these slump blocks. You can see all of these white areas down here. These are big lobes of gypsum that are essentially puked off of the ridges. in these oversteepened drainages. But we're going to take some measurements here, and we're definitely gaining a better idea of what's going on. We are obtaining our second and likely final sample of the day. Chances recording the sample ID GC2, and we've come across a nice volcaniclastic here. This is different from the last rock we sampled. I don't know if the GoPro will focus on it. This rock is characterized by a lot, I guess there is some rounded and sub-rounded stuff in there, but typically these have a lot of clasts that look like this thing right here. Angular igneous clasts. We're gonna go down this ridge afterwards.
Nothing good.
And yeah. And work our way out of here.
Get the backpack out of here.
We're going to get our backpacks on and do some side hilling. Ooh, nice catch. Ooh, nice catch. Damn.
With subsidiary grass and gravel.
I would say that the day is almost over, but I'd be lying.
It's not.
Chance and I are going back to our camp, which we deconstructed. We're gonna load our packs and then go back out to our vehicle. All right, backpacks are loaded up. We are going over the saddle down into the depths of the Rio down there where our vehicle resides.
We have another river crossing.
Yes, and then we've got one river crossing, and then we will be done with this little leg of our journey. Walking our way out here. Our destination is that big floodplain down there. On our way in, we observed this Aquilco, which we've mentioned many times today. This white gypsum. This is a really good example of potentially an intact section of rock where you have Aquilco moving into the Tordillo formation or Tordijo. And then we have these black shales known as the Vaca Muerta. And then, as we also discussed today, then what do you see over there? Chance, what do you see over there?
More Aquilco.
So something's going on. Obviously, you have to come up with some sort of structural explanation, either a fold or a fault.
If there's a fold, you should usually see like concentric rings, basically, of either older in the middle for an anticline or younger in the middle for a syncline. But here we have oldest, middle, youngest, oldest.
See.
So what kind of relationship is that, Caden?
Oh, thrust relationship.
Thrust fault.
You know what it is, day in the life of a field geologist. Yoo-hoo! This is about the time where you start thinking about cerveza. This is our last task of the day. Is getting across. Woo! Getting across about 6 pretty sizable braids. Chances dropping. Ew! Woo! That is crispy glacial water. Ooh, buddy. Sir.
Cheers, buddy.
Bow. Yoo! Yee, look at that sunset.
Damn, that is insane.
Gorgeous. We are back at the truck and we are going to say goodnight from here. We're gonna do the normal camp motions. We gotta drive somewhere. The road is flooded actually to our south, so we will not be leaving this location. But we'll probably drive north and set up a camp and make some dinner. Chance is taking some pictures of this insane sunset, and thank you for joining us for a day of geology. That was extremely fun. It was a full day. It is 9:07 and we did 12 miles and 4,000 feet of gain. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate your viewership, as does Chance. Both of us hope that this can help inspire and guide some younger students who are wanting to pursue geology, and hopefully you find it interesting even if you are not a student.
Yeah, hopefully you learned something about superposition and violations thereof.
See, thank you everybody. This one's for you.
Oj, 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 habba, babba. Det är så jag säger om din mamma. Habba,